So I'm kind of really digging this look right now, and I already filmed the video, so I'm just gonna kind of like cash in on this and monopolize on the fact that I actually look decent today and film as many videos as I can. So today I'm going to be giving you a full spoilery review for She Sings of Old, Unhappy, Far Off Things by Karen J. Werlinger. Did I get that right? Yes, I did get that right. A quick summary of this book: it is a romance novel following two main characters, Margaret, who is a 50-something professor at a religious institution for higher education, a lot to say, and she's kind of having a midlife crisis. Her husband's sick and on his way out, but he's had this huge legacy at the institution that she teaches at, so she feels like her career is being overshadowed by his legacy, and all the decisions and progress that she's made has only been because of him and not to the credit of her own talents. She is a professor for romance literature, mainly focusing on Jane Austen, and she's kind of finding it hard to find passion in that track. And our other character, Wick, is a landscape architect slash gardener who loves dogs and has chosen to, because of prior struggles in life, to trust plants and to trust pets more than people. And so the book is about how these two meet when Margaret's husband calls Wick over to do their landscaping, and they just kind of become friends and then fall in love, and it's a lovely, nice, happy, romantic story. So I found this book on BookBub. They send an email daily. I've subscribed to that for free and cheap books, and this one was free. I just read Eliza and Her Monsters, and I needed something significantly more lighthearted than that, although that was a wonderful book as well. And so I just saw this was free. The premise was interesting. We're talking about a professor and a gardener falling in love. I thought it was going to be a period piece. It would be fun. It would be a throwaway book. I'd just like cleanse my palate and get back into reading. Little did I know that Wick is a woman, so we have a lesbian romance, and guess the fuck what? It's not set in the past. It's literally set in 2014. That was like the best thing to come across. Like for the first whole chapter, I was high-key confused when it was set in, because it was talking about Margaret, our main character, has a PhD, and like women didn't really have PhDs in the early, like late 1800s is when I was expecting it to be set. And then turns out Wick is a woman, and I was like, this is going to be a really interesting period piece. And then they start talking about computers, and I was like, oh, okay, we're in today's time. That was just fantastic. Like, the low-key homophobia in the book also kind of lent itself to this idea that it might have been a piece in the past, but they're part of a Catholic institution in the South, so I get where the, like, homophobia stems from. It's not rampant, it's just kind of there, because characters in the book are dipshits. And anyways, getting straight into like the non-spoilery critiques of the book, writing style. I really loved it. I thought it was kind of perfect. It reads like an older book. Our main characters are 50, Margaret's 50-ish something, and Wick is 30-something. So it reads like a book for that demographic, which was fine. Like, I wasn't really expecting it to be for a 20-year-old, but it was kind of nice to read something that wasn't focusing on, like, more teenage drama. Issues were more in terms of, like, midlife crisis and career problems, and, like, finding passion so late in life. Quote-unquote late in life. 50 is a fine time to find your new passion in life. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. So that, just the mature tone of it I thought was really interesting. It also wasn't flowery and, like, purple prosy in terms of writing. It was very not straightforward. It definitely had its lyricism to it, but it kind of drew from the characters' lives. So there were a lot of literary references to Jane Austen and Shakespeare, since Margaret is a professor for Jane Austen literature, and it also had a lot of talk about botany and things like that. There were a lot of, like, strolling through gardens and looking at plants and talking about azaleas growing at a certain time of year, and, like, colors of flowers and how to trim hedges and things like that. which just kind of gave it a different tone. I really enjoyed that. That I haven't read anything in that tone of voice using that much, like, using a different narrative aspect to enhance the story, and I really liked it. It was a pleasant read in terms of that. The characters were really great. Wick is a butch lesbian who has a dog. The dog is the best part of the book. And, like, her character is very much built on this idea of, like, her past traumas that lend to the fact that she only trusts plants and pets more than people. That played into her story a lot, and the development from there on until the end of the book, it was very apparent, and it was lovely to see how well done the character development in that line of thought was. Same with Margaret. She is 50-something. Her age definitely contributes to a lot of her internal struggles. The fact that her husband is 30 years well and sick also contributes to a lot of her insecurities. The fact that she was closeted for such a long time lends so much to her story and her character development. I thought very well put together, and the characters were just amazing. The rest of the cast, I think, except for like 2 or 3 characters, are homophobic. So, like, I don't even care to remember their names. Like, Margaret's husband and her stepkids are just real fucked up. I don't even remember their names, but whatever. Main 2 characters were great. Story was great. The romance, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Not to mention that Margaret and Wick's lives kind of parallel a lot. Like, there's a 20-year age gap, so essentially Margaret could be Wick's mother, but Wick is over the age of 30, so, like, that age gap business doesn't really bother me past the age of 30. If Wick were, like, 26 or 27 with a 50-year-old, I'd have my problems, but she isn't. More on that later. And they kind of had the same parallels in their careers. Wick had gotten a master's degree, I think, in landscape architecture, was a Rhodes Scholar, but had seen that her life wasn't really taking her anywhere in academia, so she chose to do something with her hands. Not to mention her past love life played into that as well. And Margaret also was trying to find something more in her life. She had hit that point in her life where, like, her present career wasn't really doing much for her. But that also played in with the fact that her husband was a piece of shit and her life was ruled by, like, her husband's legacy. So our main characters definitely are in the same paths in life, although 20 years apart. So that's kind of like the main, not struggle, but it causes a little bit of tension, plus the fact that Margaret's closeted and Wick is not. That just kind of worked out really wonderfully over the course of the book. And it was such a slow burn. Her husband doesn't die until like 50% into the book, which is just really fucking annoying because he said some of the dumbest shit and I hated him. And I was waiting for this man to die. And he doesn't until like halfway through the book. So annoying. It's such a slow burn. Like, they build their friendship so slowly and it's so wholesome. Like, they support each other in times of difficulty. It wasn't instantaneous and it wasn't creepy. They were definitely friends and it built on itself so wonderfully. I just really enjoyed that aspect of it. The slow burn was, like, definitely a little frustrating in terms of, like, wanting her husband to die, but it was very much appropriate for this kind of book. Like, it worked out well. Wick's character was a little bit more stagnant. You don't get to know her backstory until later on, and only then does it play into it. Like, for a lot of the times, Wick serves as Margaret's character development. I didn't mind it. I really didn't mind it. It worked. Those kinks kind of worked themselves out later into the story because it turned out to be a lot longer than I thought it would be. And I think that allowed it to work out its issues in terms of, like, what I was finding too stagnant or too, like, erratic. Here, I do have her husband's name in my notes. Margaret's husband's name is Gavin, and he's, like, 80. He has cancer. So, for anyone who's had someone who died of cancer, and me saying, I wish Gavin dies sooner, I'm very sorry for that, but he's a homophobic piece of shit. I hated him. The second he realized that Wick was a woman gardener and not a guy, he said some really fucked up shit and I wanted to punch him in the face. And then he learned that Wick probably suspected that Wick was a lesbian and that Margaret was probably also a lesbian, and he tried to sabotage their life a lot. Margaret never really cheated on him until after he died. There was, like, one kiss moment somewhere in there. Yes, cheating, but also no cheating? I don't know. It's gray over there. But he was a fucked up person anyways. Like, do I care? It's also fiction, so not really. And he tried to, like, sabotage Wick's career, and he screwed over Margaret's life, like, after he died. He's just such a dipshit. I hate him, and his kids were awful, too. Gavin's oldest son is, like, a couple years younger than Margaret, so that, like, that weirdness of age kind of definitely was highlighted. And they're just awful to her. They don't treat her nicely. Like, she's been in their family for over 20 years, but they don't treat her like she's family. That the age gap definitely plays into how distant they are towards her, but she's come to love them, and she's come to love their kids. She considers them her grandkids, and they just treat her so badly. The grandkids like her, they're children, but like everyone else is just fucking awful to her. And honestly, Margaret deserves better. She should not have married Gavin. Like, that was definitely like lesbian trying to cover up her tracks a move, and I feel bad for her. Because that was the worst choice of guy to have chosen. Did I mention the star rating that I gave this book? I don't think so. I give this book a 2.75 stars. And here's why. So my issues with this book is a whole lot of points dropped into the story about the age gap. The thing between Margaret and Wick was not so much an issue because they kind of got together when Wick is in her 30s and Margaret's in her 50s, and I think after your 30s, you're like past your formative adult ages. You know, I think in your 20s, you're going to college, you're like trying to figure out your life, you're still not an adult. You're like an adult in training. Like an adult with a mentor before you go out to do your own job. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't feel like an adult. I'm 21 and I don't feel like an adult. So Wick's in her 30s and she's with Margaret in her 50s. I can let that pass. Gavin and Margaret got together when Margaret was in her 20s as a grad student. Creepy men are the worst. This just kind of adds to Gavin's homophobia bullshit. Like, everything that happens and everything I learn about him in this book is just makes him worse and worse character. He was just disgusting. Another thing that kind of played into this age gap issue, there were a lot of points thrown into this book about like age gap issues and whatnot, which is what caused problems in my reading experience of this. There was a character that Wick hires as her assistant as her landscaping business grows. He's a recently released convict for being in a relationship with a high school boy of age 16, I think. So this man's in his 20s, his upper 20s, and he's in a relationship with a 16/17-year-old. And he gets convicted, and he serves his time. Perfect. He was in there for a while. Like, I think he gets out at the age of like 40 or 50 or something. So he's been in there since his 20s, like 20 years or something. He's been in prison serving for being a fucking pedophile. Good. Honestly, a life sentence would be better. Whatever. He gets out and Wick hires him. I'm still trying to come to terms with that, but her reasoning was sound. He's served his time, he's learned, he's going to therapy, and he's trying not to do that again. Okay, I can live with that. But her further reasoning was that he was with a 16/17-year-old, and it was just a legal technicality that kept them apart. He didn't assault the 16 or 17-year-old, they were actually in love. Let me tell you, a 16 or 17-year-old who falls in love with someone 20 years their superior is definitely gonna feel weird about that feeling being reciprocated. And I'm sure that 16 or 17-year-old 20 years into the future is gonna realize that this person that returned their love is a fucking creep for doing that. Like, at the age of 16 and 17, you're still in your formative stages. Like, you're 2 years away from being a legal adult. But at age 21, I don't feel like a legal adult. Sick reasoning excusing this man for being in a relationship, being in love with the youngster, and going to jail on a technicality is just disgusting. Like, a minor is a minor, and the fact that you are attracted to the minor and actually pursue that was a huge thing that I just kind of fucking hated. And it kind of repeats itself a little bit a couple times with this guy and a little bit with Margaret and Wick's age gap. That, and then Margaret and Gavin's relationship, like, it's a repeating theme, and a couple of them, like, I was able to overlook, but this whole pedophilia thing was just, oof. Another thing that I really hated is a part of Gavin's backstory that kind of plays into this new employee that Wick has. So Gavin realizes that this guy went to prison for that, and he calls the reporters to publicize this guy's life, and that's just fucked up. Like, this man has been to prison, has served his time, and I think every citizen has a right to their privacy, so the fact that Gavin chose to get back at Wick for being a lesbian, for being in love with his wife, and for hiring a pedophile, he publicizes this person's life to the media, and these people living in the South get beaten up. Like, he's not someone that has the right to choose that kind of stuff. And here's his reasoning for doing that. Trigger warning, he, as a child in his boarding school, gets raped by fellow male classmates. And that's his reason for being so angry that Wick hired a guy who was gay. Not that the guy was a pedophile, but that the guy was gay. Those are actual words in the book. Like, this fucking idiot, this homophobic asshole thinks it's his right to choose what to do with someone's life just because he's had some traumatic issues. Like, honestly, you might have lived through your own trauma, but that does not mean you are allowed to take someone else's life and judgment in your own hands. The law is literally there for that. That was so majorly fucked up. You don't do that. Like, I was so glad when he died, honestly. Again, with the underage homosexual relationships thing, one of Margaret's co-workers, I think in his 20s or 30s, is in a relationship, or like is caught in a relationship with an undergrad student. Now, this age gap was definitely a little bit smaller, but like there's that administrative distance between a student, an undergraduate student, and a doctorate professor. I have some very strong opinions on this, and like all of that, I was just not enjoying those things in this book. The professor with the undergraduate student, Margaret getting with Gavin when she was in her 20s and Gavin was in his like 50s or 60s, the pedophilia excuse, the whole using your own trauma to fuck up someone else's life excuse, like all of those things were shown as like good things, or were not necessarily like, here's why it is acceptable. It was just given there as like, I think you should understand it more in this context and not in this context. And I was just not having that. I have my staunch stances on pedophilia. Hate it. Giant age gaps with people under the age of 28. Hate it. Breaking this like administrative distance between student and teacher. Hate it. Like, those things I have very strong opinions on. And I'm very sorry to offend you if you have different opinions on it, but literally it is the way I think. If you have differing opinions and feel like you might be able to change my opinions on it, go ahead, comment down below. Let's have a civil discussion. But I don't think I'm going to change my opinions on these things. Pedophiles are fucked up. People who use their traumas to manipulate other people's lives, fucked up. Not okay. It's literally not okay. Like, I understand that Gavin had a terrible childhood, and of course that's going to play into the way he perceives certain people. There were a lot of issues in those terms that I really did not enjoy, and that's why I docked down. It would have been a 3.5 4-star book, except for all of those things ruined it. Messed with how much I appreciated the book being a lesbian romance. That was more or less really wholesome. This review honestly started out being coherent and linear, and now at this point, I don't even know what the fuck I'm saying. Like, it's kind of the way my reading experience of this book went. I was really excited in the beginning. I was really enjoying the cutesiness of it, and then this shit got pulled with the pedophilia excusing. Yeah, towards the end of the book, these middle patches in the book were just kind of a mess. But overall, if I pretended that none of that existed, that aspect of the book was just really wholesome, and I really liked that. And then the rest of the shit got tossed in there, so it kind of went down from a 4-star book to like a 2.5, 2.75 star book. that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed my opinions on this book. I'm very sorry if I offended anyone with my really strong opinions. I think I still do stand by them. Some of them cross a line of consent that I'm not okay with, and some of them kind of fetishize and demonize queer relationships, which is really weird because the author's a lesbian. Aside from that, the romance was cute. It was a decent book overall. I really don't know how to end this. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!